Is Egypt safe to travel and to come visit, especially considering what's going on right now in Gaza and in Israel? Greetings from Cairo. I'm Gus with Egypt Adventures Travel. I make customized itineraries for trips to Egypt. I plan group tours and private tours. And I also connect people with vetted and trusted local Egyptian companies and partners to help out with travel to Egypt. You can get in touch by going to my website, egyptadventurestravel.com, and filling out the interest form. I figured it would be a great idea for a video talking about safety in Egypt and what the current situation is like, considering what's going on in Israel and in Gaza, to take this video while walking around the streets of Cairo, showing you what it's really like here in Egypt at the moment. I have to say, first of all, that the situation, of course, is developing. There are new news stories and there are new things happening pretty much every day, sometimes multiple things happening per day. So the time I'm making this video, this is what the situation is like, this is what my perspective is. But of course, this is a situation that is updating and changing all the time. In this video, I'm going to talk about 3 different things in regards to safety and travel to Egypt. First, I'm going to talk about the current situation and what it's like to be traveling in Egypt right now. Second, I'm going to talk about some resources that you can use to stay informed and to stay up to date on the current situation. And third, I'm going to talk about some safety strategies and tips that anybody can use on their trip to Egypt. So first off, what's the current situation like in Egypt? What's it currently like to be a tourist traveling throughout Egypt? I've been in Egypt since October 4th, 2023, and today it's October 23rd, 2023. The whole entire time I have been in Egypt, aside from seeing a couple of demonstrations on social media, I didn't actually see any demonstrations in person, but just saw posts about them on Facebook. I haven't noticed anything different about traveling in Egypt or getting around Cairo and Luxor, any of the other areas that either I've been traveling on personally or I've had guests traveling on. Of course, there have been a lot more talk about politics, a lot of discussions about Israel and Palestine and Gaza and the war. But aside from that, I haven't noticed any actual material impacts to travel. For example, I haven't noticed any delays in getting to any of the sites or getting in or getting around. I haven't noticed any closures. Even Jewish synagogues have remained open to the public, like the Jewish synagogue that just reopened in the Coptic Cairo neighborhood. So aside from people talking a lot about politics, and aside from me talking a lot with potential clients about their fears or their concerns about traveling to Egypt, I haven't noticed anything different in the last 3 weeks. It's just been business as usual here in Cairo and in the rest of Egypt. Of course, there are certain areas where things are happening, like for example, on the border crossing between the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza. That's an area where there are a lot of things going on, but that's not an area that I've ever planned a trip to. It's not an area that I even believe that people from the States are allowed to visit at this point in time. So Cairo, Luxor, Aswan, Alexandria, the main tourist areas in Egypt, everything is business as usual. There was one incident that comes to mind when I think about things affecting safety and travel in Egypt, where at the beginning of the escalation of the conflict recently between Israel and between Hamas, there was an Egyptian man who shot and killed 2 Israeli tourists and their Egyptian tour guide in Alexandria. But this was a super localized thing, and we don't really know a lot about what happened or how everything went down. But it seems like this was a super isolated and localized incident that was just involving one person who's now in custody. And I haven't heard of any other attacks or any other issues with safety with tourism groups throughout Egypt. Now that I talked about what the current situation is like in Egypt, I want to talk about some resources that you can use to stay informed. Because like I said at the beginning of this video, the situation is always changing and it's always updating. So it's on you to stay informed about what's going on so you can make your own informed decisions about whether or not it's safe for you to come to Egypt. The U.S. State Department is a good resource. In my opinion, they can be a little bit too nervous about travel internationally sometimes, but they're a really good resource to look at to get some idea about what the current security situation is like in Egypt. The funny thing about the U.S. State Department, though, is that Egypt has been at a level 3, which means reconsider travel, since the first time that I came to Egypt 11 years ago. So over the past 11 years, with all the things that have happened, aside from a period during the COVID-19 pandemic, when it went up to level 4, do not travel, it's always been at this same level, a level 3. So I always tell people, you know, if you notice right now that Egypt is on a level 3, but you didn't know that it's been on a level 3 for 11 years, if you weren't concerned about traveling to Egypt before, nothing from the US State Department has substantially changed about their recommendation about whether or not you should come and visit Egypt. It's still a level 3, just like it's been for the last 11 years when I've been living in Egypt, working here, and working with my travel company. So this is a really great time to stay updated on the State Department's recommendations, because if they do decide that they need to change Egypt to a level 4, do not travel, that would be really important for travelers to know and to consider when they make an informed decision about whether or not they should come to Egypt. Another really great resource is the US Embassy in Egypt. So there's an embassy in Cairo that sends out security updates and talks about the situation with recommendations that are tailored toward Americans. But travelers watching this video who are visiting Egypt from any country around the world, you should check your local resources, your local country's embassy, or your country's equivalent of the State Department to get recommendations to your specific citizenship. But the US Embassy in Cairo is a great resource where they'll post security updates, and they even have an option for you to enroll in a program called the STEP program. And this program allows you to get text message updates if there are any security concerns or if anything changes with the security status in Egypt. Now that we've talked about what the current situation is like with safety and travel in Egypt, and we talked about ways that you can stay informed, the third thing I want to talk about is some strategies, some tips on staying safe. One of the biggest things that you can do is consider working with a private tour guide or a private company, like working with Egypt Adventures Travel, to make sure that you're taken care of on the ground when you're in Egypt. Travelers can come to Egypt independently, and I highly encourage people, for budget considerations or if that's just the way that they really want to travel, to come to Egypt independently. But having a tour company or having at least a private tour guide with you is a really great way to make sure you're staying safe. These are people who are going to always be on the lookout for your safety and are always going to make sure that you're being taken care of. Also, if you are coming to Egypt with a travel company, that company by law has to fill out a lot of paperwork with the Ministry of Tourism and with the Tourism Police. And what this paperwork is designed to do is to keep a really clear program and idea about who travelers are, what they're doing in Egypt, and then that allows the tourism police to essentially follow along with people's trips. You might even find yourself with a tourism police escort during your tour. So that's another way that working with a private tour guide or a private company really helps out with safety. Some other advice I have regarding safety is to avoid any protests or any large gatherings of people. So for example, it's October 23rd today. A few days prior, there were some protests in different areas of Cairo. I didn't see anything when I was out and about, but I also would have made sure if I did run into anything that I would have avoided any of these protests or gatherings. Just not a good idea to get yourself involved in that type of thing. Another thing I would recommend is avoid talking about politics in Egypt for the time being, especially because in Egypt people are really, really supportive of Palestine, and they know about the United States and about the policies and how the United States is very closely allied with Israel. So this is something that a lot of people would take issue with. And so avoiding talking about politics is a good strategy, especially right now. Or if somebody engages with you in a conversation about politics, great idea is just to deflect and say it's something you're not really interested in. Or you could mention that in terms of politics, the government of the United States is one thing, you're an individual person, and you don't necessarily agree with everything your government does or doesn't do. So there we go. We talked about what the current situation is like in Egypt. Like I said, it is business as usual here. The country is open and ready for tourists. I'm having a great time leading private tours this October. And I just made it to the metro station, so I'm gonna hop on the metro and head back downtown. We also talked about how you can stay updated and informed on security during your time in Egypt. Then we talked about some tips and tricks for staying safe. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and I would love to work with you on planning your Egypt adventure. I'm Gus at Egypt Adventures Travel. Thanks for watching.